welcome to my presentation titled Reflecting on an Urban Art Collection to Stimulate Research Thinking. I'm Linda Robson and I both work and study at the Open University in the UK. My research is looking at part-time learners' experiences of interrupted study at a distance university, that particular university being the OU. Part-time distance learners frequently find themselves both physically and temporally removed from their research communities. This is problematic as it limits interactions and so limits access to knowledge and restricts access to the scaffolding mechanisms that support critical thinking, reflexivity and the generation of new ideas. Campus-based peers have relatively easy access to conversations and discussions around research and are immersed in an academic environment with opportunities to test ideas and theories leading to the construction of understanding. Whilst we can create some conversations online, they're structured in different ways and are not as serendipitous or organic as the impromptu corridor or water cooler conversations that occur when researchers are co-located. When I started my doctorate in education, I planned to address this distance deficit through attending academic conferences and meetings. But unfortunately, many of those have been cancelled or held online with limited informal discussion opportunities. One of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic has been to further restrict us to only seeing a very limited number of people within our local geographical area. So even if I'd managed to link with researchers who are geographically close, most of them I haven't seen over the past 2 years. Also, the added workload of the pandemic has caused both work and home issues to take more time and energy, so people may not have the time and energy to talk about research. Being a part-time distance learner can leave individuals feeling alone, as if they're looking out to sea, and although you know others are on the journey, you may not be able to see them. Like Anthony Gormley's statues, we're part of a network, but we're also alone. I live in Folkestone on the south coast of Kent. This sign is displayed at the railway station and it's one of the artworks by 47 contemporary artists displayed around the town, which make up the largest urban art collection in the UK. I previously took this sign, a work by Bob and Roberta Smith, pretty much at face value. Folkestone is a place where there are many opportunities to learn and practice art in its many forms. However, through my many lockdown walks and runs, I found a different value in the art on display. Not only is it visually appealing, but it also helped me to develop my research thinking, and my conversations with the art have gone some way to replacing those lost conversations with peers. I now see the term art school as both the opportunity to learn art, but also the opportunity to learn through art. I'm now going to share with you some of the art from the Folkestone collection and explain how it's linked to my research thinking. Like many qualitative research projects, the data for my project is collected through retrospective interviews with participants who are asked to remember and recount their experiences. David Shrigley's installation Lamppost as Remembered, pictured on the left, was produced by asking a fellow artist to observe one of Folkestone's Victorian lampposts, pictured on the right, and then later describe the lamppost from memory for David to recreate. I'm particularly struck by how similar, but at the same time how different the remembered version of the lamppost is. This led me to think about my research participants and how they share their recollections of prior experiences. I assume they offer a truthful account, but I hadn't previously considered the fallibility of memories and that participants may not have remembered all aspects of their experience. In a similar way to Shrigley, during my interviews, I worked with my participants to form a reconstruction of their experience which will be close to, but not identical to what they experienced. Some of my participants were consciously aware of this by saying things like, "This is what I remember, but I could be wrong," whilst others stuck by their accounts even when they were contradictory. The hanging bell in A.K. Doven's installation Out of Tune had been abandoned for being out of tune and so not welcome in its intended peal in a church. Doven acquired the bell and brought it to Folkestone where it rang alone. Sadly, the bell no longer rings unless hit by a well-aimed pebble. Doven describes the bell as having a new life, making its difference a virtue. I'm interested in how, despite the bell having a new life, it's still referred to as a church bell, despite having broken the connection with the church, is unable to lose its previous identity. Reflecting on this helped me to think about my research participants who are mature adults studying part-time at a distance. I'm investigating experiences of interrupted study, so these students have all had an experience which has stopped them studying for a period of time. My participants talked about having to give up study in order to prioritise other aspects of their lives, and in some ways they were resuming an identity or role that predated becoming a student. Some talked about being changed by study and finding that they no longer fitted into social groups where they previously felt comfortable. It was like they had become out of tune and needed to find a new place with a new tune that they could fit into. Rigo 23's mural, Earth's Oldest Satellite, is designed to cause disorientation and highlight the fact that the moon is beneath our feet as often as it is over our heads. I find this work a useful reminder that there can be more than one truth. Coming from a science background, it's been a challenge to change my approach from testing hypotheses to one of interpreting data to achieve a reliable, plausible explanation. Initially in my research, I thought students fitted neatly into categories of returners, non-returners, with it broadly being that returners had positive experiences of interrupted study and non-returners negative experiences. However, what I've found is that both returning and non-returning can be positive or negative, and even defining return or non-return is not straightforward. This artwork encourages taking a look at our assumptions and consideration of alternate ways of looking at the world. Another work that challenges assumptions is Spencer Finch's Colour of Water, which invites you to select the colour which matches the sea. Whilst we often think of the sea as being blue, it's actually a mix of browns, greys, greens and blues. This artwork encourages the viewer to pay attention to the details within the larger body. Coming to research, it's important that we explore the nuance and detail of our data and consider how we may see things differently when looking at it in a different light or through a different lens. Ruth Ewan's clock installation shows French Republican time on one side and standard Georgian hour time on the other. She titled the work, "We Could Have Been Anything That We Wanted to Be," which is a reference to a song in a Bugsy Malone movie, in which the next line is, "It's not too late to change." There is an obvious comparison that can be made here to my participants being mature adult learners. Most of them had left education by the age of 18 and had recently returned to study, so making a change in their lives that could be considered a late stage. But for me, this artwork made me think about assumptions. We all accept that time is based on a 24-hour day, and we have to in order to have a shared understanding if we're going to be able to timetable our lives to interact with each other. But society could have decided to work differently. Equally, when I look at my student participants, they frequently challenge assumptions. Alongside assumptions that individuals may have about themselves relating to academic capability, there are also assumptions about roles and if or should various things change. Home-based roles came up frequently in my interviews, with questions about study being a luxury and if students are neglecting other aspects of their lives in order to indulge in their studies. Another artwork that is linked to time is Ian Hamilton Finley's Weather is a Third to Place and Time. This work is a practical reminder of the role weather plays in the lives of those who are at sea or close to the shore. Reflecting on this work, I have in my mind replaced the word weather with environment and considered the importance of environment on my distance learners. When students first start any distance education programme, they will usually consider their study environment and maybe set up a specific place where they have a desk, new stationery, whatever materials they need close to hand. But a conductive study environment is actually much more complex, as the individual also needs to have the right psychological environment to concentrate and engage successfully. For many, people around them have a big impact on motivation, both short and long term. The wider external environment, including the weather, can facilitate or distract from study. For students who are dealing with some form of crisis in their studies, they will consider if they need to weather the crisis or take a break from their studies. Just as a fishing boat may be planning to head out to sea from a particular place at a particular time but is disrupted by the weather, Students may have made study plans, but they are sometimes disrupted by uncontrollable and potentially unexpected conditions in their environment. The final piece I want to share with you is Pilar Quinteros' Janus Fortress. This two-sided sculpture of Janus was placed on a cliff top with one face overlooking the English Channel and the other identical face looking inland. Janus is the Roman god of transitions, and also sometimes described as being poised between the past and the future. When we talk about transitions, it's often a one-way process. A caterpillar transitions to become a butterfly, or in higher education, the transition is focused on students start by transitioning into university and then transition out to employment when they have completed. Much of the retention literature in education focuses on successful transition into the institution, which will lead to student success. It's often a linear process, which is either completed or failed. This sculpture shows transition as a two-way process, both coming and going. This led me to thinking about the participants in my study and the transitions which they encounter on different levels. There is a transition each time the student begins a study session, shifting from other roles they may have to being a student. For those that take a formal break in their studies, there's a transition from being a student to being paused, and another transition is needed at the end of the break if they are to resume their studies. There may be pressures on individuals pulling them in different directions, so transition becomes a messy experience rather than a smooth linear process. There are many more artworks in the collection and lots more ideas to explore. I hope you've enjoyed this brief tour of just 9 of the artworks. As well as inviting questions, I'd also like to invite you all to come and visit Folkestone. Please do take a note of my email address, and if you are ever in the area, I would be very pleased to give you a guided tour. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.